صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد خلقنا الإنسان ونعلم ما توسوس به نفسه ونحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد إذ يتلقى المتلقيان عن اليمين وعن الشمال قعيد ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد ولقد خلقنا الإنسان ونعلم ما توسوس به نفسه ونحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد إذ يتلقى المتلقيان عن اليمين وعن الشمال قعيد ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد وجاءت سكرة الموت بالحق ذلك ما كنت منه تحيد ونفخ في السور ذلك يوم الوعيد وجاءت كل نفس معها سائق وشهيد لقد كنت في غفلة من هذا فكشفنا عنك غطاءك فبصرك اليوم حديد وقال قرينه هذا ما لدي عتيد ألقيا في جهنم كل كفار عنيد مناع للخير مناع للخير معتد مريب الذي جعل مع الله إلها آخر فألقياه في العذاب الشديد قال قرينه ربنا ما أطغيته ولكن كان في ضلال بعيد. قال لا تختصموا لدي وقد قدمت إليكم بالوعيد ما يبدل القول لدي وما أنا بظلام للعبيد. قال لا تختصموا لدي وقد قدمت إليكم بالوعيد ما يبدل القول لدي وما أنا بظلام للعبيد. يوم نقول لجهنم هل امتلأت وتقول هل من مزيد. وأزلفت الجنة للمتقين غير بعيد. هذا ما توعدون لكل أواب حفيظ من خشي الرحمن بالغيب وجيء بقلب منيب ادخلوها بسلام. ذلك يوم الخلود. صدق الله العلي العظيم. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. And we have already created man and know what his soul whispers to him, and we are closer to him than his jugular vein. And when the two receivers receive, seated on the right and on the left, man does not utter any word except that with him is an observer prepared to record. And the intoxication of death will bring about the truth. That is what you are trying to avoid. And the horn will be blown. That is the day of carrying out the threat. And every soul will come with it a driver and a witness. And it will be said, you are certainly unmindful of this, and we have removed from you your cover, so your sight this day is sharp. And his companion, the angel, will say, this record is what is with me, prepared. Allah will say, throw into hell every obstinate disbeliever, preventer of good, aggressor, and doubter, who has made as equal with Allah another deity, and then throw him into the severe punishment. His devil companion will say, O our Lord, I did not make him transgress, but he himself was in extreme error. Allah will say, do not dispute before me, while I had already presented to you the warning. The word will not be changed with me, and never will I be unjust to the servants. On the day we will say to hell, have you been filled? And it will say, are there some more? And paradise will be brought near to the righteous, not far. It will be said, this is what you were promised, for every returner to Allah and keeper of his covenant, who feared the most merciful unseen and came with a heart returning in repentance. Enter it in peace. This is the day of eternity. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. Salawat. So the speaker is not here yet, so I don't really know what to do, but we're just going to have to wait for him, I guess.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. We've mentioned the final factors of guidance, and last night we talked about the heart, both being the place that gives us and shows us guidance, shows us what's right, shows us what's wrong, and that also the heart is the place where guidance sits in. Tonight we want to talk about and address this question. If we have all these factors of guidance, we have God guiding us, not letting us fall into separation from Him. We have the Holy Quran guiding us. We have the prophets, the imams, their speech, their actions, themselves metaphysically guiding us. How come then we are not guided? And how come other people are not guided, that don't turn into their hearts towards Islam, or other people that they don't turn their hearts towards the Ahlul Bayt? How come people are not being guided? If we have all these factors of guidance, we also said we have guidance from within, our hearts, our actions, our mind. We are surrounded with guidance. And we know that if we break all these barriers and all these warnings that we have, a person will be doomed and go to hell. But how come people are not being guided, and how come we are not being guided? Sometimes it's important to focus on ourselves more. As one of the scholars would say, he said that they would ask him, how come you don't backbite? How come you don't talk about others behind their back? He'd say, I'm too focused about myself. I'm too concerned about myself to worry about other people. So let's just worry about ourselves individually. All of us sitting here, it's the end of the month of Ramadan. How come we don't go forward and progress in terms of guidance? And how come we're left sometimes? And we said how dangerous that is, that guidance should be continuous. And the fact that if we don't progress, we are resisting a higher form of guidance. We're actually somehow disbelieving in it. We're not accepting it. So why is it that we cannot go forward? Something is holding us back. And that is what we're going to talk about tonight. And that is the barriers of guidance. The barriers that won't allow us to move forward. Some of those barriers, and we're going to talk about one specifically, but some of those barriers are is that first there are barriers in our understanding. When you're presented with Islamic teachings and Islamic beliefs, sometimes for some people, those beliefs might seem at the beginning, right? They might resist, and it might not be what they're accustomed to believing, because they come from a culture that is much different. They live in a culture that has been distorted, that has set itself, that has been led astray from reality. Therefore, when they approach the nur and light and the teachings of the Prophet, sometimes they're like, I haven't heard that before. That seems kind of strange for me. So there are barriers in our mind. There are barriers in our beliefs first, right? There's barriers in our understanding, and then there's also barriers to our soul and to our hearts. What are some of the barriers that we have in understanding? Because we come from a society, a culture, and that culture, because we're living in it, and the more that you're affected by it, the more you're used to live by it, the more you're used to even raising your kids by that culture, you don't even notice it. For example, one belief is this, the belief that we are servants of God. If you tell people in this culture, I want to be a slave of God, they'll say, slave? A servant? Why do you want to obey anybody? Right? And that is against one of the principles of liberalism, that you should be free to act and to do whatever you want. Why do you want to restrict yourself? Right? So when you come from a culture that its culture is based on liberalism, for example, and you're being told and pushed to do whatever you like, to do whatever you want, and man should be free. Man should be free to, there shouldn't be any barriers between men and women. They should be able to, in society, however they want, there should not be any barriers between them. There should not be any restrictions for us in our own personal lives. Therefore, when it comes to Islam and you talk about these concepts of ubudiyat, which is being a servant of God, it seems a little strange at the beginning. But at the same time, it's also fitri, it's in your heart, because we said your heart guides you. In the verses of the Quran, for example, حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانِ, if I remember it right, Allah makes you love Iman. Allah makes you love faith. At the same time, you have your heart, which is guiding you towards the fitra, which is the correct belief and correct guidance that you have. But your culture is being a barrier for your understanding. Therefore, some types of principles that we talk about in Islam, it might be a little for it. And I said, like that example I gave, being a slave and servant to God. Another barrier of understanding is empiricism, is that too much reliance on the senses and sense perception. I want to put everything in the laboratory. I want to use the scientific method on everything. I want to make sure I experiment something. And if I cannot experiment on it, if I can't see it, na'udhu billah, it doesn't exist. Right? That's called empiricism. Too much over-reliance on the knowledge that comes from the senses, from the eyes, the ears. Therefore, when somebody's raised in such a culture, you say, hey, I believe in God. They say, just like they told Moses or they told other prophets, how can I believe in a God that I do not see? And we say, you do not see God with your eyes. You see God with your heart. So therefore, these are barriers of understanding, and these are some of the problems that we as Muslims, especially Muslim youth face in a culture that we would call this, going upstream, going against the tide. Because it's a culture right now that's based on empiricism. Even though we believe that this is the lowest form of knowledge. The knowledge of the eyes, the knowledge of the ears, senses, is knowledge that animals have. But we as humans, with critical thinking, with rationality, with logic, we develop and believe in concepts that we cannot see. We solve problems in math that you don't necessarily need to be able to see, or in physics. So we have a higher type of knowledge which comes higher than the senses, which is things that you understand with your mind, with philosophy. That you understand that you are a dependent existence. Everything you see is a dependent existence. Therefore, there needs to be a existence that does not depend on anything, which is God. And higher than that, we say there is another form of knowledge, leaving empiricism, which is knowledge from the heart, knowledge from the soul, knowledge by presence. And that is the knowledge that you have of yourself, that you know that you're one, you know that you're hungry, you know you have doubt, you know you are afraid. This is knowledge of presence. And we believe that this knowledge is the knowledge, this type is what we use to gain knowledge of God. Because the knowledge of the mind is a general knowledge, but knowledge that you get from your heart, knowledge by presence, becomes a specific and detailed knowledge. So these are some of the barriers that we have in terms of our belief, and it's important for us as Muslims to step back, to take a step back and to not necessarily say that whatever my society believes in is right. If this was true, then imagine all the other civilizations that were doomed, and you read the Quran. If you believe in whatever your society believes in, well, what if they are wrong? What if they are corrupt? Does it mean that you have to be wrong and corrupt at the same time? So no. We have to think things logically, individually, and not be corrupted by beliefs that came from certain philosophers that had doubt, and after they left religion and after they rose against religion, they wanted to replace it with other things. We should be careful of that. So those are barriers of some of the barriers in knowledge and understanding. So when it comes to guidance and you talk to somebody about Islam, they might resist a little bit because they're ingrained in this society and you want to try to wake them up. The second thing is there are barriers to our soul. There are barriers to our hearts. We also have barriers that are holding us back. One of those is Satan. Satan is our enemy. Satan has power. It's not just a concept we just say. He is powerful. But of course, the army of God is much more powerful. So we have Satan in one hand. There's not enough time to talk about him. But he exists, and the Quran says, Aduwwun Mubin. He is a clear, manifest enemy to you. And Satan at the same time, what do you think he wants to do the most? What I ask you, brothers and sisters, what would happen that Satan would be doomed, that his plans would be doomed? If the 12th Imam reappears, when he does, not if, when he does, if he reappears, Satan's entire plans will be doomed, because he wanted to misguide everybody, he wanted to corrupt them, he wanted to make them rebel against God. But when the 12th Imam comes and establishes a worldwide government, and people truly begin to worship God, Satan's plan's doomed then, right? So he tries to do whatever he can to make sure that your 12th Imam, Imam Mahdi, does not reappear. That is his entire purpose. It makes sense, right? So he attacks families, he attacks husbands and wives, he creates fights. He wants to make sure one of those attacks he does is amongst the family institution. And we'll talk about that inshallah later on. That he wants to make sure that children that are going to be raised are not soldiers of Imam al-Zaman. Wasn't he afraid that somebody would uprise? So he would kill children, he would kill the sons, he would kill men to make sure that the person that was going to remove him from power would not be born. Satan in the same way. He wants to make sure that the new generation are not going to be his enemies. They're not going to follow the leader of would be his enemy, which is the 12th Imam, Imam Zaman. So one of the enemies is Satan. One of the barriers is Satan and his tricks. And he has tricks. He had plots against the prophets and he has tricks. The other is the world, the dunya. The dunya is a barrier for us. It is attractive. It is like in the narrations, like the skin of a snake, that is smooth to touch. But inside there is a poison in it, that if that poison gets us, we will become sick. And we can see ourselves, did that poison affect us? Are we people of the world or not? That's a barrier too, the barrier of the world. But tonight what I want to talk about and address is something that myself, I might not necessarily act upon, that I myself have not overcome it. But it's good to talk about it. Maybe I can, inshallah, with the barakats of the mimbar, I can, inshallah, help myself in taming it and conquering it. And that is the nafs, the desires. Nafsa ammara, the desires that we have in us, inciting desires. And when we say nafs, it can have different meanings in Arabic. Nafs can mean the soul, nafs can mean our ego. But what we're going to talk about tonight is the nafsa ammara bis-su', The nafs that inclines has the lowly desires, the worldly desires. Because we also have this nafs of rahmaniyah that is encouraging us towards Allah and through spirituality, encouraging us to go to the hereafter. So let's talk about the nafs. Its definition, if you want to read in the Quran, Surah 12:53, and I did not acquit myself. Indeed, the soul is a persistent enjoiner of evil. Inna nafsa la'ammaratun bisu. Ammara, it comes from amr. It's commanding and persisting over and over and over. It won't stop. Over and over, you're fasting. And your nafs is like, I want some food. I'm hungry. That looks good. Say, hey, no, let's just wait a little bit. It stops. 5 more minutes later. I want some more food. What happened to the food? I'm thirsty now. How about a little bit water? Just stop, nafs. Right? So it's ammara bisu, over and over, it won't leave us alone. You cannot kill it. It's alive, it's with us. But you can control it. So this nafs is the narration from Imam Ali alayhi salam, Qura al-Hikam says, نظام الدين مخالفة الهوى. The system of religion is based upon opposing your desires. Why? Because if you do not oppose your desires, you are making your desires your religion and your deen. You either worship God, you follow God, or you want to worship yourself and follow yourself. And that's the problem with the nafs. It makes you run away or flee from ubudiyat, which is being a servant of God. Brothers and sisters, when you look at most Islamic instructions, it is at the same time taming your nafs. That's the purpose of it. It's telling you, for example, fast and how you develop your willpower against your nafs. It tells you to wake up for fajr and you're sleepy, you're tired, you're opposing your nafs. It tells you when in the middle of the day, when you're the most busy and you're at work, it tells you come and pray now. If you don't have wudu, get wudu, ablution, and pray. So these instructions that we see from God, they're all for one reason. And this is one of the philosophies behind our takalif and obligations. And actually it says if you don't make this intention, maybe your acts of worship are not accepted, which is imtithalul amr. I want to follow the command of God. That's our intention when we want to pray or do an act of worship. We say imtithalul amr. I want to obey the command of God. So the nafs wants to do the exact opposite. It wants us to rebel. And so we see the instructions we have in Islam, it makes somebody have a very strong sense of willpower against themselves compared to somebody that doesn't have religion, doesn't have anything to instructions, doesn't have commands from God. They're doing whatever they want, right? They're doing whatever they think right is right. And sometimes when they get tested, you see how weak they are. They don't drink a little bit water, they're dying of thirst. It gets a little hot, they're about to pass out, right? They're not conditioned. So all these commands are conditioning us, and we're learning to tame our souls. Right? Even mustahab things, recommended things, and staying away from the micro-discouraged things, we're developing this. And as my teacher used to mention, he said these are like brakes in a car. You're testing your brakes. And over and over and over, when your nafs wants something, you're making your brakes stronger. So that when you're on a road and it's windy, you don't fall off down the road and fall into the cliff. You have good brakes. You control yourself. Because if this nafs is allowed to do whatever it wants, believe me, it will, and some people, it will be like an attack, like a pack of wolves. An attack and danger, it will be a danger. Or for some people, if they're really lazy, it'll make them sleep and be a couch potato. They're 24/7 watching movies. I mean, that's how the nafs is. If you want to just let it go, it just wants to sit down and sleep and just relax the entire day, wasting our lives. So what can we do because we said guidance depends on the nafs, controlling the nafs. And the more we do good, as one of the verses in the Quran says, I'll read to you, وَالَّذِينَ اهْتَدُوا, and those who are guided, زَادَهُمْ هُدًى, He increases them in guidance, right? وَأَتَاهُمْ تَقْوَاهُمْ, and gives them the righteousness, gives them taqwa. Those that are guided, He increases them basically in taqwa, in guidance, and in not sinning and not disobeying. So if God wants to guide us more, He increases our taqwa. He increases our ability to resist the urges of the nafs. So that's guidance. Real guidance is this, is that He's giving you this ability now not to disobey Him, which is the nafs. So what can we do? Is the end of the month of Ramadan. We have a few nights left. And this is a very special time period. It's the time period that a lot of those that are supposed to go to hell will be freed during the end of Ramadan. If you look at the narrations, multiple, it gets doubled, tripled, whatever, that they're freed from the hellfire. It's not that once you pass the nights of Qadr, it's all done and you can go home now. We use and benefit from the nights of Ramadan until the end. Because we say this, the month of Ramadan is so special for us, so holy, that we don't even understand the real worth of one night of it. One night of it, even though Laylatul Qadr and those nights put aside, one night of it, we don't understand how precious it is. So each night is precious, and we're trying to maximize our benefit in the month of Ramadan by talking about these topics. So what can we do to fight against this big enemy we have? One is we can do this. We seek help from God. That's the first thing we do. We seek help from Him, how Imam Sajjad alayhi salam in Sahif Sajjadiyah, which is an excellent book of dua and prayers, did. I read this prayer, this munajat, this whispered prayer, and somewhere I was speaking last month of Ramadan, and somebody told me this, said that he really enjoyed this prayer, just listening to it, and said that that was one of the nicest nights of the night of Ramadan, hearing and reading and learning about this whispered prayer of Imam Sajjad about the nafs. Please recite a salawat. Imam Sajjad complains to God about the nafs. Ilahi ilayka ashku nafsan bisu'i ammara. My God, to you I complain of a soul commanding to evil. We said ammara, it's commanding, persistently commanding you. Oh Allah, so the first thing we do is we seek refuge. How Imam Sajjad prays, oh Allah, I'm tired of this nafs. It's driving me crazy. What can I do? And you ask Allah, help me. I complain to you about it. Inshallah, He will make you tame it. وَإِلَى خَطِيئَةِ مُبَادِرَةٍ. This nafs, what does it do? These are some of the characteristics of the nafs according to Imam Sajjad in this dua. It rushes to offenses, to khatiyah. It rushes. It's not slow. If it sees something haram it wants, it's going to rush, like an untamed animal. وَمَعَاصِيكَ مُولَعَةٍ. And it's eager to disobey you. Remember that nafs that's in between our two shoulders, our two sides, it's eager to disobey God. It wants to disobey God. So know your enemy. Recognize your enemy. وَلِسَخَطِكَ مُتَعَرِّضًا. It wants to expose itself to your anger. What the nafs wants to do is get the wrath of God, wants to make God displeased with you. تَسْلُكُ بِهِ مَسَالِكَ الْمَهَالِكِ. The nafs takes me to the roads of disasters. How many people, they listen to themselves, and after they made one mistake, and then after that, they're either angry, their nafs became angry, they hurt somebody. Some people might have damaged somebody, maybe they even kill somebody. It's just 1 second of anger, this nafs that's in us, and they're doomed. They either get executed or they get life imprisonment, right? Or other things that happen in the dunya, let alone the akhirah. Just 1 second of anger, this nafs, if we lead it takes us to the roads of disaster if we don't control it. وَتَجْعَلَنِي عِنْدَكَ أَهْوَانَ هَالِكَ. It makes me the easiest of perishers before you. It can easily make me perish. So the first thing is we ask Allah how Imam Sajjad does. The second is that we understand its enemy, how it's an enemy of us. And we understand that we have to fight against it. And we understand it is one of the biggest fights that we have, day and night. As some of the narrations say, أَعْدَى عَدُوِّكَ نَفْسُكَ الَّتِي بَيْنَ جَنْبَيْكَ. The worst enemy you have is the nafs between your sides. The worst of your enemies is between yourself. I ask you, brothers and sisters, this question. Would you ever empower your enemy? Would you ever give it tools, ability, make it stronger? No. The more you listen to your nafs, the more you're weak, the more you have less willpower, the more he becomes stronger and takes a hold of you. So know that sometimes when you give it what it wants, next time it's going to want twice as much. Next time even more than that. So this enemy, you have to cut off its head as soon as you can, or to control it as soon as you can. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, something that will help us fight our nafs. And as I said, it's not necessarily something that I'm working on myself. I'm not a master of myself. One of those things that can control the nafs and our desires, that really helps it, which is the third thing. So first, we said we ask Allah to help us controlling it, because everything is in His hands. 2, we understand it's our worst enemy. 3, and we realize the more you give in to it, the more you empower it. 3, we remember death. When you remember death, all those dreams and aspirations that your nafs had, it wanted to, for example, maybe when it comes to money, maybe it wants to have haram money. Why? So that it can get these things in the world. And why the nafs itself wants power, wants to look good in society, wants a beautiful car, wants a huge mansion, wants a huge home. It doesn't end the things it wants. So what would happen if you told your nafs this, that tomorrow you're going to die? So how would that home benefit you? How would that brand new car help you? I'm not saying these things aren't good. Get them. Thank God for them. Work for them in the halal way. But don't do it because of the nafs. Do it because of God. Make God inside all your intentions. If you get that, you worked hard, you have a nice car, you have a nice home, it's good. Don't be attached to it. Don't want it because you just want to have it. Want it because you're creating a family, you want to make a pleasant atmosphere, and you thank God, you do shukr of Allah. Some of the narrations say thanking is better than having patience, being grateful. You get it and you thank God for it. But they're not doing it with this intention that it's for the nafs, that I want power, I want possessions, I want worldly goods, right? So then, if you tell that nafs, tomorrow I'm going to die, it's going to be okay, I don't want it anymore, right? How am I going to benefit from it? If you are trying to be the lead person in your company, just because of your ego, not because I want to be in this position so I can help people, look at the intentions. Then you tell your nafs, tomorrow I'm going to die, next week I'm going to die. There's no guarantee in our life. Do I have a certificate that I have to live 50 years, 100 years? If so, somebody show it to me. Nobody has such a certificate. Look at the graves. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. How many kids didn't even have the chance to be born? So this death can happen anytime, and you tell your nafs this. And then once you tell your nafs this, the death is facing me, it's this threat that I have, my nafs, it's like spilling water on the fire. It turns off. You extinguish the desires of your nafs. If you ever want to hurt people because of your nafs, if you have low desires, You say, what happens tomorrow? I'm dead, right? And that is why maybe in some of the narrations it says that this is why God creates sickness and poverty and death to make us humble, to crush the nafs, right? And if it wasn't for these, it says man, his head was always high. He would always have an ego problem. He gets sick a little bit, and that nafs realizes himself, his ego realizes that I'm so weak. There's nothing I can do when I'm sick. Or he gets him in poverty and says, and he makes it all the aspirations and all the dreams that he had, he says, I can't fulfill it. Or he thinks about death, and then all the things that nafs wants, immediately it goes away. Then he falls into being a servant of God, right? And that is one of the one of the things we can think about is death. Imam Ali alayhi salam talks about how death, it causes us to remember, death causes us to have basically, to kill the nafs in Nahj al-Balagha. And this is what we said that we want to reach, is that we want to reach ubudiyat, being a servant of Allah. And when we, unfortunately, sometimes we talk about this topic about reaching God and being a servant of Him, this is a lost goal for us sometimes. It is a lost goal because if you notice, you can miss being a servant of God. You miss, if you let your nafs go and however it wants and you're free, good, your nafs got what it wanted, but at the end, in your heart, in your spirit, you're telling me, I miss being a servant of God. I miss being under His protection. I miss following His instructions. In ubudiyat, and being a slave and fighting against the nafs, there's sweetness, there's fulfillment. Imam Ali says, this is, I'm just paraphrasing, one of the greatest honors I have is that I am a servant of God. I am an abd of God. Don't we say, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, that Prophet Muhammad is his servant? Please recite salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So basically, this sense of being a slave, even though it is hard, it's hard to follow the instructions of God, and everywhere God says, you say, you taslim, you submit. But in it is the sense of fulfillment, because this is how we've been created. This was the design and this was the plan. He wanted us to be a servant of God. There's a story with Imam Musa, I call him alayhi salam, the seventh Imam. Please recite a salawat. Thank you. My nafs wanted it. Imam Musa Kadhim alayhi salam was walking, and to show about how you guys miss, and I'm sure those that they don't have religion and they didn't find God, they have this. Inside them they say something's wrong, and they miss being a servant of God. They miss, and people, you'll feel this when when our spirituality is high, the month of Ramadan. You love being a servant of God. You love fulfilling His instructions. Your entire life comes into just following what He says. They say those that reach very high levels, especially when they approach their death, they start flipping through the Risala, Tawzi al-Masail, for example, the book of Islamic law, and they're looking for it, each one line by line. They're looking at it, enjoying it, and reading it and following it. Because this is, say, the instructions how to be a servant. And they're looking at that as an instruction manual of how to be a slave of God. So Imam Musa Kadhim alayhi salam comes and is walking, and this person has a party at his home. And it has a party, alcohol or whatever, and people are invited. So, and I say this is the guidance of the Imams, through their speech, through their presence. He asks the servant of the person in that home, he asks this person, the host, the owner of the home, is he a free man or is he a slave? And he tells him this. He says that person goes, of course he's free. He thought that he's talking about, is he a slave? Because there were slaves during that time. Is he a slave? Or is he free? So of course, if he's having a big gathering or whatever, he's going to be free. He's not a slave. So the servant doesn't understand it, but talks to the owner. The owner then says, why were you late? What happened? He said, this person walked and says, are you free? Asked about you. Is he free? Or is he a slave? Then he thinks about it. And he begins that, I said that inside us we want to be a slave of God. He misses that feeling of being a slave of God. He comes rushing towards Imam Musa, Kadhim alayhi salam. Bushr is his name. And they call him the barefooted Bushr. He comes barefooted. He hears this sentence from Imam Musa, Kadhim, chases him, follows him. Says, I want to be a slave. I want to be a servant of God, basically. He's tired of being free. See, being free from the commands of God also has this pain. I want to be a slave. I want to be a slave. He never put on shoes, they said after that. He would always walk around barefooted because that was the time that his master, Imam Musa Kadhim, taught him to be a slave, a servant of God. And he didn't want to forget that. So remember, inside our when we fight against our nafs and we're aspiring to be a servant of Allah, just how Prophet Muhammad is and the Ahlul Bayt, and this is the way we reach high position, is by humbling ourselves to God, we will reach a high position. Remember the fact that inside all of us, we have this innate feeling of wanting to be a slave, and you feel it. You love it. You love getting commands of God and fulfilling it. And now, alhamdulillah, you know that God is satisfied with you. And we talked about death. And finally, we'll talk about the last thing which we can help to fight ourselves, our nafs, is being organized and having a plan. Whenever someone doesn't have a plan, when a person doesn't have a job, doesn't have anything to do, doesn't have school, they're at home, and what do they fill themselves their day with? Anything. Just video games from the morning till night, or usually from the night to the morning. Then they fall asleep, they wake up at noon, or in the afternoon they play more video games and pizza. Right? That's usually what happens in summer times. So when you don't have a plan, and you don't have goals for yourself, you're allowing it, the nafs, to reach whatever it wants to quickest and easiest. But Imam Ali alayhi salam gives us instructions. When he is hit in Masjid al-Kufa in the head, he has a will to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. He gives a will and gives them instructions and tells them this, says, I advise you both, Hassan and Hussein, and all my children and members of my family and everyone who I'm writing reaches. Brothers and sisters, when you read Nahjul Balagha, remember, you're not listening to my speech anymore. When somebody is reciting Nahjul Balagha, you're right now listening to Imam Ali's speech. Right? That is the beauty of Nahjul Balagha. You're listening, you're reading his letter. He is speaking to you. He says, whomever my writing reaches, it's reaching you, right? So Imam Ali wanted this to reach you. What does he tell you? He says this, that to fear God and keep your affairs in order. وَنَظْمَ أَمْرِكُمْ نَظْمَ أَمْرِكُمْ. Keep your affairs in order. Have a plan. When you're supposed to study, and again, I'm telling myself this because I might procrastinate. Whenever you procrastinate, you have something to do. Take that and finish that and then go on to the next thing. Every time you procrastinate, you're supposed to read this topic and you go and read another topic, and then that topic leads you to another topic. Know that you're empowering your nafs, and know that that discipline that you lack is making you yourself weaker to your nafs. So one of the best ways for us to fight against our nafs is having a plan and a schedule and a set what I'm supposed to do, and when it comes to my work, what I'm supposed to do when it comes to my spirituality, I have a plan, and you follow that plan. What am I supposed to do with my family time, and that extra time that remains for education, reading, that extra time that I have, I'm just going to have fun. It's controlled, it's limited, and it's supervised. It's not allowing my nafs to do whatever it wants. I'm going to have 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day doing whatever I like. But it's part of my plan, right? So this is the last thing, that when we are organized and we organize our affairs, we're not allowing the nafs to come in and to disrupt our plans and to do whatever it wants. Now we have a plan throughout the day and we follow that plan, and then with these 4 things, you ask God for help from your nafs, you understand it's your enemy, you aspire for death, you aspire for meeting Allah, and that's like turning off your desires for your nafs, and you're organized and you have a plan, then you're in this better situation to, inshallah, not to allow this barrier of you and guidance to affect you. Now you remove this barrier, and each time you go forward more and more in the path of hidayat and guidance. Please recite a salawat. If we can dim the lights, we'll beseech Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We'll ask Allah, by the honor of Imam Hussein, especially his daughter, his 3-year-old daughter, the children of Imam Hussein. Brothers and sisters, if somebody were to threaten you and say, I'm going to kill you, we would be worried. But if God gives you a test and says, not only should you be killed, but I want your family members to be with you. I want them to witness it too. I want them to be hurt and imprisoned. I want them to become captives. How much of a greater test would that be? When we talk about the nafs, the more we sacrifice for God, the more we will be guided. Our journey in life is to sacrifice, to give whatever we have for God. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his test would not be complete unless he brought his family. And that is the letter, what he writes. He says that, why are you taking your family? They ask him, and he says that God wants them to be captives. Because the family of Imam Hussein being captives completes Karbala, completes the test. It's a much difficult test on your nafs, on yourself. That now I'm going to go forward with this movement of light and nur, but with me has to come my 3-year-old daughter. My 3-year-old daughter has to miss me, cry for me. They say whenever you want to reach the haram of Imam Hussein, the shrine of Imam Hussein, enter his shrine with tears. And one of the best ways is to wait by the doors and to remember this 3-year-old daughter. Because his 3-year-old daughter faced many, many pains. It's as if instead of counting the stars at night, a little girl, she counts the stars at night. Instead of counting the stars at night in Karbala, she had to count the wounds that she incurred. She had to look at her ears and the earrings that they ripped off from her. Her feet, Imam Hussein, are like your lips, dried and parched. They become blistered and cracks. This 3-year-old girl walking from Karbala to Kufa. She has instead, when a 3-year-old girl becomes an orphan, they caress her. Instead of being caressed, she gets smacked and beaten. Look and see, there is no more color in her face. They brush the hair of a 3-year-old girl. Those that have a daughter, they understand that a 3-year-old girl, her hair needs to be brushed. Instead, the fire brushed it when they set fire their camps and their tents. And when she says that day, Ya Abata, they bring the head of Imam Hussein to her. Ya Abata, Man alladhi aytamani, who has made me an orphan fi sighar sin, in such a young age? They bring her the head of Imam Hussein in Sham. And there she's talking to her father. She says, Father, it's so hard to be an orphan, as if she's saying. She says, Father, because when a little girl meets her father, she begins to complain and cry and tell her father her pains. Father, it's very difficult to be an orphan. She grabs the head of Imam Hussein. Father, it's so hard to be a captive. She says, Father, at the age of 3, I have aged. I have become so old at the age of 3. My heart misses you, Father. Let me not tell you what I've seen. Let me not tell you what I've heard during this trip in Karbala. But tell your mother Zahra this. At least tell her this. That I have suffered some of her pains too. The pains of being beaten, the pains of tasting the beating of the enemies of God. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا وَمُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Ya Allah, we ask you because the honor and the test, the difficult test of Imam Hussein. All the children that are sick, all the children that are needy, all the children in the world in Yemen that are being bombed, and you see their pictures under IV. Ya Allah, we ask you to give them shafa and give them a speedy recovery, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you our nafs, which is bothering us, which is taking control of us. Give us victory over our nafs, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, give us, inshallah, expedite the return of the 12th Imam and make us of his soldiers and companions in the occultation and also during his uprising. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا سيد المرسلين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة بنت محمد سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا سبتي الرحمة الحسن والحسين. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا أبا صالح يا أبا الحسن. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل مخرجك. صلوات.